Running out of money in retirement is extremely unappealing, which is why everyone wants to know, when can I actually pull this off safely? My name is Reese. I'm an independent financial planner, and I do a lot of retirement plans. So I see a lot of different situations. And just yesterday, actually, I brought on 2 new separate clients. Both of them great people, thoroughly enjoyed the meetings, but both of them had very different situations. The first had quite a bit of money, but was retired already and somewhat youngish. And I hit that plan from every thinkable angle, and I could not get it to a place where we could be pretty confident that he would not run out of money. So not safe at all. The only real solid option for him was actually to go back to work for a while, at least part-time, just to beef up the coffers a bit. But hey, way better to know this now than when you're running out of money at 75. The other client was pushing 65 and had a respectable pot of money, but her main source of income was actually coming from her pension. And it became very clear very quickly that she could hand in her notice tomorrow if the mood so struck her. Then I finessed the plan a bit, came up with an optimal withdrawal strategy, and we actually found out that not only could she retire right now, but we could actually increase how much she gets to spend in early retirement by $2,000 a month, safely, with lots of margin for error. It blew her mind. Now, obviously, both of these situations are totally different, but both of them were happy that they took the time and the effort to look into them properly before actually making these decisions. Because anyone can retire anytime they like, but doing it safely is an entirely different ballgame. Now let's take a look at Susie Badoozy. And by the way, this name actually came from one of you, and you know exactly who you are. Stacy, thank you. Absolutely brilliant name. Love it. Anyway, Susie Badoozy is a wonderful, wonderful human being. She's 59 and she is deeply intrigued by the idea of never setting foot in her office again. And so she calls me up and she says, "Hey, Reese, can I retire on Monday?" And I say, "Yes, but let's just make sure it's a good idea before you actually do it." So here is the situation. She's got some money, $530K in her RRSP, which she chucks $400 a month into, $110K in her TFSA, it's maxed out, good for Susie, and a non-registered account with $100K in it. Oh, and she's got a bank account slush fund with $31K in it as well. So she's sitting on a cool $771K. Moving on, all her investments are in a balanced portfolio. She's going to live until she's 90, and she wants to be able to spend $5,000 a month in today's dollars. Now, on that note, we've agreed to peg long-term inflation at 3%. And yes, we can and we will stress test this with higher inflation later on, but this is just our base case. She owns a condo worth $500K and has no debt. And last but not least, she is tracking for 80% of the maximum Canada pension plan benefit, 100% of old age security, and she's even got a defined benefit pension plan from an old employer that'll kick in when she's 65 at $1,000 a month. Clearly, Susie Badoozy is doing well. She has a situation that many people would envy. But as we can see here, she's only tracking at 68% of her goal. Now, we haven't finessed this plan at all yet, but as it stands, she's looking at more than a decade of not having enough cash. So we got some work to do. Susie agrees, and so we start with her retirement income amounts. She thinks $5,000 a month is good for her go-go phase when she's doing more in early retirement, but she's willing to drop it down to $4,500 a month at age 75 for her slow-go phase when she starts to slow things down a bit. And then at age 85, she's fine to drop it down to $4,000 a month for the no-go phase. This is good. As long as she's comfortable with this, that move bumped her from 68% on track to 73% on track. Now here's what we're looking at. Down at the bottom in blue, starting at age 65, is her defined benefit pension of $1,000 a month. You can actually see that it's a growing amount over time, and that's because it's indexed to grow with inflation, which is awesome. Above that and to the left, we have CPP. Again, it's growing over time because it's indexed to grow with inflation. And same with OAS above it. The rest of the stuff we're looking at are Susie's various investment and cash accounts. But moving on, we still have a lot of work to do. So let's look at her CPP. Originally, she was thinking of taking it at age 60, as soon as possible. But if she delays taking it, she will get an increased benefit for the rest of her life. Now, I've done tons of other videos on how that works, so I'll spare you all the details here. But the main point is that if she chooses to bump it out to age 70, which is as far as she can, then she gives herself another healthy bump from 73% to being 79% on track. Now, notice what happens here when she does this, though. It changes where her income comes from each year. She's now spending way more of her own resources earlier, but she's doing that because it increases the amount of quote-unquote guaranteed and indexed income that she'll receive in her later years through the government benefits. Again, notice what happens when I click and unclick this option. If she takes it at age 60, she will hit a shortfall in 2042, and her shortfalls will be pretty large going forward. But if we choose again to delay it to age 70, the amount of shortfall in those later years shrinks considerably. The shortfalls still start in the same year, they're just way less. Now let's see what happens if she chooses to delay old age security as well. Well, it does give her a bump, but it's not nearly as dramatic. And notice how she actually runs out of her own funds 1 year earlier if she delays. And again, that's because she's spending more of her own money earlier. But the trade-off is that her shortfalls in the later years are less substantial. In reality, statistically, hardly anyone actually delays both CPP and old age security to age 70 unless they really need to. The whole idea of spending most of your own money early on so that you can rely just on government benefits in the later years of your life leaves a kind of sour taste in the mouth for many people. But Miss Badoozy is willing to do whatever it takes to get her to her goal, so she's going for it. So next up, we're going to take a look at improving her withdrawal plan. Right now, she's taken from her TFSA and non-registered accounts first so that her RRSP can continue growing tax-deferred for as long as possible. And while that would make sense for some very low-income tax years for the next while, this kind of strategy is rarely a good idea. Maybe if you can land some GIS benefits out of doing it, but if you have significant resources, there's not really a lot that you can count on there. So let's take a look at the opposite strategy. Let's look at pulling from the RRSPs first. Well, it did add a bit, but let's see if we can do better. Let's look at a prorated withdrawal strategy. Basically, what's happening here is that the accounts are all being withdrawn from proportionately over the years. And that did add some juice to the plan, bumped us up another 1.7% to 82% on track. We're getting there, but slowly. What if we draw proportionately from the RRSP and non-registered account, but keep the TFSA until the end? No real change there. But I would still choose this all day long over the other option because the TFSA has the most flexibility and the most capacity to benefit off of long-term growth. So I generally like to leave these plans alone for as long as possible. Now we could tinker here a bit more, but I'm going to move on because clearly this is not going to solve a decade plus of shortfalls. So I brought up the idea of downsizing to Susie. But she can't really go a lot smaller than the condo she's in, so that's a no-go. Plus, she loves that place, so she's staying there forever. She can't really reduce her retirement income goal either because it's already kind of tight given where she lives. And since she's not expecting an inheritance, we're really starting to run out of legitimate options that don't entail bringing on a bunch of extra risk. And being the enormous party pooper that my kids think I am, I tell her as much. But she's kind of confused because she has over $750,000 plus a pension, plus CPP and OAS. How is that not enough for a reasonably humble retirement income? I mean, it's just $5,000 a month. It's not 10 or 20. She's not living like a princess. True. But it's not actually the amount that she wants, it's how early she wants it. So let's forget this fancy software I have for a sec and let's do some quick, unsophisticated math. She wants $5,000 a month after taxes to spend until she's 75, which is a bit more than 15 years away. So that's $60,000 a year after taxes. But let's just round it up to $70K a year before taxes, because that's what you'll actually need to spend to get to the $60K after taxes. Probably a bit more, but anyway. Because she is delaying her CPP and OAS until 70, and her defined benefit pension doesn't start until age 65, this is a good 10 years that she has to come up with pretty much all of that money from her own pocket. And 70 grand times 10 years is 700K spent. Now, of course, there's some growth along the way, and we can see in our software that the resources don't actually run out for another 8 or 9 years, but it was that first decade that did the damage. Big time. Even if she takes CPP and OAS as soon as possible and therefore spends a bit less of her own money in these early years, she's now getting less in CPP and OAS, and so her own money really only lasts her about an extra year in the end. But as we noted earlier, now her shortfalls going forward are way deeper. The moral of the story in this particular case is that retiring early is actually really difficult to pull off unless you have a large pension plan that you can take early, because you will have to spend a lot of your own money earlier, and that kills the ability of your own investments to compound and grow on themselves. Now, Susie may hate my face after this meeting because I didn't really tell her things that she wanted to hear, but probably deep down she does love me because I told her the truth and I gave her her best options. And I also left it with the cherry on top. I helped her see some additional options that she really hadn't thought through yet. I know she hates her job and she wants to get out of it, so what would it look like for her if she semi-retired for a while and found something that she didn't hate? Well, let's look at it. Susie is used to making 80 grand a year. But what if we dropped that down halfway? What if we dropped it to 40K a year doing some job that she actually likes? And maybe if she did that, she'd even be happy to do it for longer, maybe even the next 10 years. And look at that. Now we're tracking at 109% of her goal. Totally doable and with a bit of a safety margin built in. Or maybe she doesn't actually want to do that and she's willing to just slug it out where she is as long as she can see a light at the end of the tunnel. So how many more years would it take of doing that? Well, let's find out. 1 year doesn't cut it. What about waiting to age 63 to retire? Ooh, can she do it? Can she hold that long? Well, even if she could, there's no safety margin there. 101% is good, but it's definitely not great. So now let's add a little bit of part-time work on top of that, but let's keep it really chill this time. Let's just add 5 years and make the income only 20 grand a year, a quarter of what she's making right now. Back to 109%. And we can tweak this situation until the cows come home, whatever that actually means. But the point is, if you know your situation, if you know the implications of the decisions that you're thinking of making before you actually make them, then you can make very wise and informed decisions, and you can save yourself a ton of grief.